Hello, true crimers, and welcome to Only Murders and the Missing, a podcast presented by UQ Criminal. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of true crime. In each episode, we'll take a deep dive into the story, unraveling the mystery and uncovering the cases that still haunt us. Through our podcast, we will shed light on the victims, honoring their memories and seeking justice on their behalf. Beyond storytelling, we are advocates for the missing and the murdered, lending our voices to those who can no longer speak for themselves. So, grab your headphones and prepare to join our mission. Are you ready? Welcome to Only Murders and the Missing. Episode 18. The investigation into the blood-soaked murder of the doctor's wife. Dr. Samuel Sheppard was convicted and then acquitted for his wife Marilyn's murder. The evidence was stacked against him. But did her husband do it? It was supposed to be a joyous Independence Day celebration for the Sheppard family in 1954, but it turned into a nightmare when Marilyn Reese Sheppard was brutally murdered in her home. Marilyn, who was 4 months pregnant with her second child, was beaten to death in her own bed. Her body was left with over 30 deep gashes on her face and scalp, and her pajamas had been partially removed, leaving her exposed. The sheets were soaked in her blood, and the walls were dripping with heavy spatter, a gruesome scene that no one should ever have to witness. Her husband, Dr. Sam Sheppard, was convicted of the crime, but exonerated after 10 years in prison. On the 4th of July, 1954, 31-year-old Marilyn was found beaten to death in her bedroom in her family's lakeside home in Bay Village, Ohio. Her husband, 30-year-old Dr. Sam Sheppard, a local neurosurgeon, was asleep on the couch when he heard his wife scream his name. He says he ran upstairs to the bedroom and had to fight off the intruder who had just killed his wife. But his story didn't quite add up, and he was charged with her murder. Samuel Holmes Sheppard appeared to be living the dream after marrying his high school sweetheart Marilyn and settling down in a wealthy Cleveland suburb. Sam was a successful American neurosurgeon who by all accounts had a happy marriage with his beautiful wife. The couple had a 7-year-old son, Samuel "Chip" Sheppard. On the evening of July 3rd, 1954, Dr. Sheppard and his wife were hosting their neighbors at their lakefront residence. During their gathering and while watching the film Strange Holiday, Sam dozed off on the daybed in the living room. Sometime after midnight, Marilyn said goodbye to their guests. In the early morning hours of July 4th, a close friend of the Sheppards, Mayor Spencer Houck, received a frantic phone call from Sam, saying that Marilyn was dead. Houck and his wife quickly made their way to the Sheppards' home and found Samuel shirtless in his study and in a state of shock. His pants were wet and there was a blood stain on his knee. The police arrived at around 6 a.m. and discovered Marilyn lying on her back in the couple's bed. She had been beaten to the extent that she was unrecognizable. The sheets were soaked in blood, and there was heavy spatter on the doors and walls. The autopsy showed that she had died around 4:30 a.m. Shockingly, it was also revealed that Marilyn was 4 months pregnant with her second child. Assistant Coroner Lester Adelson reported that Marilyn had a total of 35 injuries on her head, face, and hands, as well as one on her shoulder. According to Samuel's account, he was asleep downstairs when he heard Marilyn call out his name. He rushed upstairs and caught a glimpse of a bushy-haired man in the bedroom before being struck unconscious. When he regained consciousness, Sam said he ran to his son's room and found him unharmed. He then went downstairs and saw the perpetrator escaping through the back door. Sam said he chased the tall unknown figure to the shores of Lake Erie. A struggle ensued, and Sam was knocked out again. When he came to, it was nearly dawn, and he discovered his shirt and watch were missing. The distraught doctor then urgently made a phone call to his neighbor at 5:40 a.m. Curiously, the family's dog did not bark at the intruder entering the home, and Chip managed to sleep through the entire violent encounter, despite being in the nearby bedroom. Several belongings from the house, including Sam's fraternity ring, watch, keychain, and key, were suspected to have been stolen but were later discovered in a canvas bag hidden in the shrubbery behind the house. When authorities could not find any signs of forced entry into the Sheppard home and later discovered that Sam had been having an affair with a younger woman, suspicion shifted toward him as the primary suspect in the investigation. As the only witness to the crime and the most likely suspect, Sam was taken into police custody. The trial was a media circus. The press was given a tour of the Sheppard's home and the crime scene where Marilyn was bludgeoned to death. Sam's character was under heavy scrutiny. He lied about his romance with his mistress, a young woman named Susan Hayes. Things weren't looking too good for the doctor. On the stand, he testified in his own defense and claimed that he had been asleep on a daybed downstairs when he was awakened by his wife's screams. Sam told the court, "I think that she cried or screamed my name once or twice, during which time I ran upstairs, thinking that she might be having a reaction similar to convulsions that she had in the early days of her pregnancy. I charged into our room and saw a form with a light garment, I believe, at that time grappling with something or someone. During this short period, I could hear loud moans or groaning sounds and noises. I was struck down. It seems like I was hit from behind somehow, but had grappled this individual from in front or generally in front of me. I was apparently knocked out. The next thing I knew, I was gathering my senses while coming to a sitting position next to the bed, my feet toward the hallway. I looked at my wife. I believe I took her pulse and felt that she was gone. I believe that I thereafter instinctively or subconsciously ran into my youngster's room next door and somehow determined that he was all right. I am not sure how I determined this. After that, I thought that I heard a noise downstairs, seemingly in the front eastern portion of the house. After conducting tests on the trousers, it was found that only a small amount of O-type blood, which was Marilyn's blood type, was present on the doctor's left pant leg. The absence of blood on Sam's trousers was a crucial point in the trial. The Sheppard defense team argued that this indicated Sam's innocence, while the state claimed that it only proved that the trousers were not present in the room during the murder, or that Sam never struggled with Marilyn's blood-covered killer. A jury found Sam guilty of second-degree murder on December 21, 1954. While still maintaining his innocence, he received a life sentence. However, after spending 10 years in prison, Dr. Sheppard was exonerated in 1966 when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the excessive media coverage had prevented him from receiving due process. The saga of Marilyn's tragic murder continued with her husband's retrial in 1966, which aimed to clear his name. This time, there were no cameras and only a handful of reporters present. Sam's lawyer, William Corrigan, declared that the injuries Sam sustained were consistent with his account of the events and were caused by the intruder. Neurosurgeon Charles Elkins had examined the defendant and discovered that Sam had a cervical concussion, nerve damage, many absent or weak reflexes, and an injury near the second cervical vertebra in the back of his neck. However, the defense said the evidence at the blood-covered crime scene did not match the doctor's story. The only bloodstain found on Sam was on his trousers. If he had beaten his wife to death, he would be covered in her blood, much like the walls of the bedroom. On November 16, 1966, the jury delivered a verdict of not guilty. Although he was a free man, Sam struggled to cope with the aftermath of the wrongful conviction, and his health deteriorated rapidly. The trauma of his experience led him to alcoholism, which ultimately took his life in 1970 when he died of liver failure. Outraged at the injustice served to his family, Chip was determined to find his mother's true killer. His suspicions eventually led him to Richard Eberling, the Sheppard's window washer at the time of the murder. Mr. Eberling insisted that he was innocent. He believed that with the exoneration of Dr. Sheppard, there was nobody else for the people to blame except him. But he claimed that he did not commit the crime. "They have nobody else to go for except me. Heavens no, I didn't do it. I don't even kill wasps in my home. It's not my nature," Eberling said. In an unrelated case, Eberling was sentenced to life in prison for murdering an elderly woman under his care in 1984. He died while serving that sentence. He was never officially connected to Marilyn's death. However, in 1997, DNA tests on the decades-old evidence may have shed light on the true killer. The tests revealed blood and semen from a third person at the crime scene. The potential match? Richard Eberling. But here's the twist. While the DNA points to Eberling, it stops short of conclusively proving his involvement. Despite the uncertainty of the DNA results, Chip believes Tease is the answer he has been waiting for. "The truth has finally prevailed," he said. "Since I heard the results, I've bounced back and forth between anger and relief. At least now Mom and Dad can be remembered as the people they truly were." Still, not everyone agrees. Critics and Eberling's lawyer dismiss the findings. Despite 2 trials and plenty of physical evidence in this case, the identity of Marilyn Sheppard's killer is still a mystery. Some people are still convinced that her husband may have been responsible and has ultimately gotten away with murder. Or maybe the real killer has yet to be brought to justice. Regardless of whether this case is ever solved, one thing remains true. The loss of Marilyn and her unborn child is a tragedy that will never be forgotten. Are you addicted to true crime? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. To connect with me and read more true crime stories, go to unquestionablycriminal.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.